What is one of the worst things we can experience on our fitness journey and as a lifter? The dreaded plateau, being stuck at the same weight in the gym, failing on the same, rep number every single time, being stuck at the same body weight or body composition, muscle groups that just don't seem to grow. This may be the sign of a plateau. Or we might just need more time to adapt, or a better program that fits us better. Or, we may need to just put more intensity into a certain area of our life to get off of this number, whatever it is, whether it be, weight on the bar, reps, body weight, muscle size, whatever it is. So that's what we're going to go over in today's episode, is how to determine if you are truly in a plateau and what to do about it. Thank you for tuning in to the Lifting Cues podcast, the podcast for lifters. And today's cue, like I said, is plateaus. What are they? When are we truly plateaued? And what are the steps we need to take to change it? I'm Coach Quinn, aka Coach Q, online and in-person fitness coach specializing in curating training and nutrition plans for strength and physique development. I've been a lifter for over half of my life, and now in my 30s, am on the journey of becoming a competitive powerlifter. I'm going to take all of that experience along with, real world people and real world results coaching and give you the best lifting cues to help you reach your goals. So when we're talking about plateaus, the first thing that we need to understand is, what is a plateau? A plateau is 4 to 6 weeks of consistency in the same routine that was previously making progress, which has now stalled. So the time frame here is very important. Notice I said 4 to 6 weeks with no more progress. So we need to be in a program for that long and for things to not move before we have reached a plateau. People want to, make huge gains in the gym after maybe 1 week, 2 weeks. They're not seeing results. They're like, hey, we need to change the workouts. I need to change my diet. My macros need to change, whatever it might be. That's not long enough. Our body can take some time to adapt, especially as we continue to adapt. As you continue to lose weight, your body may need more time to get off of, settling points, or to adapt metabolically, to adapt to, the diet that it's doing. Your body gets more and more comfortable where it is, homeostasis is a real thing. Your body is always trying to come back to one homeostatic, form. So it may take more time to adapt, especially as you continue to adapt. So that's why this time frame is important. You need to make sure that you are truly stalled, and you don't just need more time. Also, the same routine that was producing results. So you have seen a result with this routine, whether it be the training program or the diet, so that you know for a fact that this did actually work. It's not just the wrong program or the wrong diet. You're not eating the wrong foods, or your calories aren't actually low enough. Whatever the case may be, this routine was producing results, and now it is no longer. So that would mean that something needs to change there. If the routine was never producing results, it may have just been the wrong routine for you, or you weren't as consistent as you thought you were. So that's why this is not the same thing as the program just not working. The program did already work. We know it did. Now we need to figure out why it is no longer. So we know that we just need to adjust some variable, and we don't need to shift to an entirely new program. So a plateau is not the same thing as a program not working. We know that the program works. There just has to be a reason that our bodies have adapted, and a variable that needs to change. Whether that be, Sometimes we're just not actually being as consistent as we think. There are a lot of factors that go into adaptations, from strength, muscle, body weight, all these different things. So we need to figure out if it is the case that we're actually just not being consistent in every single one of these variables. Do we have everything under control to say that we are truly plateaued, or are there just some things we need to maybe add or hone in on? Or is it truly the case that it is just time to give the body new stimulus to force it to adapt to something different because it has fully adapted? But if we don't know all of the variables and we're not keeping track of all the variables, it's impossible to manage. What gets measured gets managed. So we need to make sure that we are measuring and considering everything. So, what are all of those variables? So, it's going to vary goal to goal, but in any fitness journey, whether it's physique, strength, fat loss, whatever our goal is, we have a bunch of different things that are going to contribute in some way that we need to make sure are being measured, being managed, and that we are being consistent with, and that we understand how they affect what we're doing so that we can make these adjustments when our progress possibly stalls, or if we fall off on one of these tasks, we need to know what it is, why, and how to get it back to make sure that we get back on track. So we're going to start out with your training program. I think exercise personally is the number one thing that everyone should be doing regardless of your goal. I think for general health, there is nothing you can do that is better than exercise. So we're always going to kind of start with the training program. I know a lot of people like to jump right to nutrition, but I want to focus on training first. So when we're considering our training program, what variables do we need to control for? Now, this is whether we're doing strength training, endurance-based training, any of it. It is, first of all, how much volume are we doing? If your goal is strength, how much volume on the lifts that you want to get stronger at are you doing? For muscle, how much volume are you doing per muscle group that you want to grow? If it's endurance, how much running are you doing? How much volume of exercise are you actually doing? What are your rep ranges, intensities, the loads being used? After we consider just how much are we doing, how hard are we going, how heavy are we lifting, all those different things. Endurance based, what is the intensity that you're going at? What are the intervals that you're using? So at what intensity is the cardio, and do we need to adjust, that in some way? How much daily activity are you getting outside of that training program? So this is going to affect, one, your cardio, your metabolic, calorie burn sort of deal, and also it's going to affect your recovery. If your daily activity is super, super high, like you work a job where you are on your feet a lot, some sort of manual labor where you're doing a lot of physical activity at your job, maybe your recovery might suffer. We might need to look at what you're doing in the gym to match that. Or if you're being very, very sedentary and you're not getting where you want to go, maybe it's too little. So we can almost up the volume in the gym, or whatever the case may be. But we need to look at that training program. It needs to be well thought out, well planned out, and tracked accordingly. Now, step 2 is going to always be nutrition. So what is our caloric intake? What is our goal? What's our calorie intake? What is that doing for us? When is the last time that calorie intake has been, calculated, adjusted, everything like that? How long have we been at that caloric intake, and what is it doing for us? How much protein are we eating? Does that need to go up or down? What do our carbs look like? How many carbs are we getting? If we're not performing as well in the gym or growing as much, maybe we need more carbs. Maybe it's too low. What kind of fats are we getting? Is that causing some hormonal issues? Is that affecting recovery? Do we need to get more healthy fats into the diet? And then what does the nutrient density look like? What does the quality of the diet look like? Sometimes people on, a bulk can get into too much processed food, go into that dirty bulk range. Maybe we're putting on too much fat. Maybe we're not getting the nutrients. Maybe we're just low energy, low recovery, but we're not eating enough fruits and vegetables, so we're not getting our vitamins. Making sure that that nutrient density and food quality is also on point, and does that need to change as well. Next one is sleep. What is the quantity of our sleep? How much are we getting? And then what is the quality of it? Are we sleeping through the night based on that quantity? So quantity comes first. We want to try to get as much as possible and give us as much of an opportunity to sleep as much as possible, because they can show that people that are in bed longer, that just give themselves a longer amount of time in bed, seem to perform better than people that get less time, even when, the sleep is kind of equated. So giving yourself more time. So that's why quantity is always going to be first. Then we will focus on quality. Just getting as much as you can is going to be the first step. Then overall recovery. How are we recovering? Is load being managed properly? Are we doing things too much outside of the gym to recover? Are we not doing enough? Recovery kind of goes into, it kind of covers everything, but we need to know how we're recovering. Are we sore when we come into the next workout? Are we not able to perform as well because of that? Are we getting injured? So recovery is kind of a blanket look at all three of the things above. How do we have to manage that based on our recovery? It's based on how we feel. Then we're going to look at stress levels. I think this is a much, much bigger component to our health, our physical, mental performance in general than I think it gets enough credit for. I really am starting to believe that overall chronic stress in, modern society today is probably one of the biggest factors contributing to poor health. I'll probably do a whole podcast on why, but it affects your mood, your decision making, your emotional health, your energy levels. People with more stress feel pain at a higher level. So injury occurrence, recovery, everything just takes a toll from, the hormonal fluctuations. And like I said, even sleep can start to be affected by stress. So it affects recovery, it affects your nutrition, it affects how you train, it affects everything that happens in your body. And I don't think it gets looked at enough. So I am going to look at it through the lens of these plateaus, and is it causing any of that? Are unwanted or abnormal stress levels affecting us in some way? And then lastly, we'll look at supplementation. Is there anything we can do supplement wise to maybe help break a plateau or help any one of those things up the ladder? But we always want to make sure that everything else is in line before we even really consider supplementation. Even the best supplements on the planet, over the counter ones. The best one is probably creatine, outside of like protein powder, but I don't count protein necessarily as a supplement because it is such an important, macronutrient. So we'll look at like creatine as the most effective probably supplement that there is. Most people get maybe like a 3% strength gain over their lifetime, which, I'll take it. It has a lot of really great other benefits. The safety profile is great. I'll take the 3% benefit. But again, we're only getting like 3%. So even with everything else, that's all you're adding to it with probably the most effective supplement on the planet. So trying to fix plateaus and stuff with supplementation is just kind of peeing into the ocean, for a lack of a better way to say it. That's really kind of what you're doing. So that's why we're just going to look at that last. We're going to look at that to get that last little bit of benefit if we've done everything else that we can. And, something like sleep quality, maybe that could be improved with supplementation if everything else is in line. Stress levels, maybe there's something we could do supplement wise to kind of help with that, but we need to have stress management techniques in place first. So, thinking about those kind of things, we'll look at possibly what supplementation could do. So, if we don't, to wrap that up, if we don't get control of all these variables and we're not tracking and managing them, we don't know what needs adjusted. Okay, so we have our variables in control, or we have an understanding of what variables go into, bodily adaptation and us reaching our goals or not. So let's break it down goal by goal, how to determine whether we're in a plateau and how each of those variables actually will affect us so that we can determine what to do about it. So we're going to focus on strength, muscle and body composition, and then fat loss, weight loss at the end there. So I'm going to start with strength. A plateau in strength is us not making progress in load or reps for a particular lift for those 4 to 6 weeks. Remember, we were making progress, and then at a certain point it stopped, and we've been doing the same thing for at least a month, and we have not been able to progress off of a certain load, either for one rep, or we have not been able to take a load and get more reps with it for 4 to 6 weeks. Again, 2 weeks is not enough. 3, all right, we're starting to think about it. Once we hit that 4th week, okay, now we need to start assessing things in a different way. So we're going to assess all of those variables above, starting with the training program. I said volume was the most important thing in the training program. I'm going to save that one actually for last. So we need to understand what the volume is, but that's also probably going to be one of the harder variables to change. Our workout time is pretty set in stone as to, how much time we actually have. So adding more volume isn't necessarily always going to be the answer. And, from a recovery and a mental standpoint, it's not always the best thing to do. Adding more heavy sets of squats, maybe that's not the first answer. Maybe that's not what we need to do, as long as we're hitting those minimum thresholds. Remember, for strength, we need 6 to 9 hard sets per week. As long as we're hitting that minimum, if you're only doing 3, yeah, let's maybe bump that up to 6 or 9. But if we're getting, those thresholds, we'll get to volume. It might be the case that we do need to add more, but I'm going to try and do that last. So the next thing I'm going to look at when it comes to strength is what rep ranges am I working in? Are we only doing, heavy sets of singles? Are we never doing any singles? Can we find a different rep range to manipulate to help us maybe break off of that weight? So let's say, you're stuck at a max squat of 400 pounds for one rep. And you keep doing, sets of singles, and you just can't get 405. No matter what you do, 405 is just not there. You can get 400 every time. 405, you just keep failing. Maybe we need to back that off, do some higher reps, do some heavy sets of 3, find your max set of 3, find your max set of 5, start to work a little bit more in that rep range to see if we can get ourselves a little bit stronger there. Maybe, doing a few reps over time helps you strengthen the muscles that you need to and gives you a little bit more volume to really make that adaptation, work through fatigue a little bit more so that you can push through that hard rep, Or if you're always training in sets of 3 to 5, you don't really train with singles, and you keep trying 405 and it just doesn't go up, maybe you need to start to figure out how to do singles, train some more heavy singles to learn how to do that one single rep a little bit better and really hone in on your form there and get used to heavy weight on your back a little bit more and adapt to those single reps. and maybe that will help. So looking at what rep ranges you're training in, and then you can look at possibly changing one of those. So then, next one would be intensity. Are we training with not enough intensity? Are we training too easy? For strength, you don't necessarily have to train to failure. You really don't actually even want to, because you are training with heavier and heavier loads. It is fairly fatiguing to train at a high intensity, but maybe we're staying too far away from failure. Maybe we do need to take some time to push a little bit harder. Maybe we need a 4-week block of work where it's like, okay, I have some time. I'm going to take the time to really push the intensity, push some weight on this lift, and I'll figure out a way to make sure that I recover from it. Maybe we need to take something from somewhere else, but I need to push the intensity here because I just haven't been pushing hard enough, and I think it's affecting me when I try to get that 1 rep max. I'm just not able to push through it enough. And then, are we training with too high of an intensity? Is the intensity just too high? Because if that's the case, maybe our recovery is being affected. We're not feeling good by the next time we even get to squats, or you squat one day and then your legs are still sore and that affects your deadlift day. Maybe you're just training too intensely. You need to actually pull back, recover a little bit better. We can still push some heavy weights, but maximizing that recovery is going to be the key. And that's really the key, I think, with intensity in general, is maximizing recovery, especially with strength, because it is so specifically focused. And, normally when we're talking about strength in the gym, we're talking about how do I get, my big powerlifting lifts, the big 3, squat, bench, deadlift. How do I get those stronger? And those are extremely fatiguing lifts. So how do we do this without destroying our recovery? How do we push that intensity without ruining our recovery? So maybe we need to pull the volume back when we push intensity up. Like I said, because they are so fatiguing, if you push too close to failure too often, you may end up impairing recovery. So we need to figure out how to get off of this without destroying our recovery. Maybe it is, selecting exercises that help us grow muscle groups that will help produce more force for that lift. Like if your bench is stuck and you need to grow your triceps, maybe we can push some tricep stuff to failure. It's a little bit more isolation without destroying recovery. We get our triceps a little bigger, they can produce more force. Maybe we get a little bit better on the bench. So maybe you can find that intensity there in some more bodybuilding isolation style training to grow your muscles bigger so that they can help you produce more force as you continue to practice the lift. So you get really, really good at the lift and you get bigger, which will inevitably make you stronger. So maybe that's a good way for intensity to help out. Other thing to consider with intensity is our rest periods. How long are we resting in between sets? When you're pushing intensity really, really high, you need to make sure that you have long enough rest periods so that you can hit that intensity again on the next set. If you're doing 3 sets and you do your first one and you rest for 60 seconds and do the second one and you're not ready to do the same weight for the same amount of reps, you are not resting long enough. You need to rest long enough so that that next set can match at least the first set that you did, at least mentally. At least okay, I feel like I can do that again. If your body doesn't get there, that's okay. We understand that. Maybe we can, rest a little bit longer, but making sure that you feel like you can do what you just did again would be good for you. So when we're pushing intensity higher, we need to consider those rest periods. The workout may take a little longer. We may have to adjust somewhere else. So intensity has all of its own, individual components. And that's why, again, when we're considering being plateaued, we need to consider all of these variables. How are they affecting what we're doing and what we're trying to do? And are we actually measuring these things? Because if you're just going into the gym and going through the motions and you're doing everything as hard as you can, or you think you are, and as fast as you can, maybe you don't even know what variables need adjusted because you're not even thinking about it. You're just like, I just don't understand why I can't get this squat. But maybe it's because you haven't actually honed in on these things. And when you have real goals, and as you continue to get more advanced, we need to hone in on all of these things. Last one with the training program is going to be load, especially for strength. We need to manage our load. How do we do that? If we can't lift any heavier and we're stuck, we can't just lift more, right? So we need to kind of manipulate other variables of the lift that maybe allow us to lift a little bit heavier. So let's take squats for an example. Maybe, you can't do the squat that you want to competition depth, but if we overload that lift, now we get used to having heavier weight on our back. Our body is able to adapt to that part of it. So at least we are holding with our core and all of our stabilizer muscles a heavier weight, but we go down to pins maybe about halfway and then come back up. Even if we don't come back up, just getting that weight unracked and starting to lower it down is going to strengthen our body and cause us to adapt to a heavier load. So this is how we can maybe manipulate load. Maybe, squatting down to a box that's a little bit higher than parallel. Maybe I can put a little bit more weight on, get down there, again, adapting through most of the range of motion, but with a much heavier load, so that when we put, say, like I said, we're thinking about that 400. Maybe we can do 425 down to halfway and back up. Then we get 405 on our back. We know what this feels like. It doesn't feel as heavy. And now maybe we can get through that whole range of motion with that load. Also kind of utilizing pauses or different variables that help us get through what would be called like our sticking point. So if you know that in your squat, it's, a little bit above parallel, maybe holding a pause down in that parallel position, holding that time under tension in there longer, getting through that range of motion with under a little bit more tension might help us adapt so that we can get in and out of there. Maybe we need to develop a little bit more power, so it's something that makes the load heavier at the bottom where we struggle more. Or if we struggle with the lockout, maybe it's bands so we can finish out that lockout. Just practicing different things that make certain parts of the lift harder so that we can adapt a little bit better and are able to get through it might help us with load. So when I say, modifying load when it comes to strength, we're trying to figure out how to modify the lift to help us do better under load based on where we struggle, or, just trying to find ways to overload and get our body used to that. And when it comes to like cardio and daily activity and strength, maybe this is really where, with cardio, this is where kind of recovery really plays into it. Are we doing too much cardio to really gain strength? Do we maybe need to pull back and just focus on getting strong? Or are we just getting so winded that we can't do reps, or we really can't recover in between sets because our cardio is just garbage? Like, maybe you actually need to do more so that you can actually, recover and get your heart rate back down and get it under control so that you can control it in between sets, control your breathing during sets. Maybe you've been so focused on strength that your cardio is absolutely trash, and that's just not good for you performance-wise in general. So maybe we even need to up it. And then, like I said, looking at daily activity. Are we doing too much? Do we work a manual labor job that's making our making it impossible to recover from training, or just we can't train hard enough, so we need to figure out how to manipulate the variables so that we can manage volume and train hard enough. Whatever the daily activity might be, how do we adjust it? Or again, are we so sedentary that like we can't make cardiac adaptation to actually get, better physically? Do we need to do more daily activity? Are we too sore because we're so sedentary? Are, certain movement patterns just not there because we're sitting all the time and just can't squat or deadlift properly? How do we get more daily activity if we need it? So adjusting that variable there, but understanding what it is, how it's affecting our strength. All right, next one, nutritionally. For strength purposes, are we eating enough to fuel performance? Now, this is not going to be a podcast, and I am not going to be a coach that believes you need excessive amount of carbs to be strong. Now, do you need carbohydrates? Yes. Not to survive, but to thrive performance-wise. Yes, we are going to need carbohydrates, but that does not mean we need to excessively pound carbohydrates. This does not mean that we need to eat Rice Krispie treats before we lift. I'm sorry if you do that. If you enjoy it and it fits into your diet, awesome. But do not think that you need to force feed yourself sugary foods before you lift just to be strong. That is not the case. Especially when we're talking about powerlifting training, which I'm going to be talking about. We're talking about strength in a 1 rep max sort of deal. If we're talking about CrossFit, that's a whole different topic that I'll let someone else who is much better versed in CrossFit talk to you about. I will tell you, if you do it, you're gonna need more carbs, period. End of story. You're gonna need a lot. It's a shit ton of volume, and you have to be really strong. But when it comes to just general strength and even powerlifting strength, we don't need nearly as much as we think. But we will want to have some. So when you set your carbohydrates, maybe we're looking at 3 to 4 grams per kilogram of body weight. Somewhere around there would be kind of the ideal range. And that is really kind of thinking about, what is my caloric intake? Is my caloric intake high enough to fuel performance? Because we're probably going to set a protein number that is pretty fixed regardless of our goal. The 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight is where that protein number is going to sit. And it may adjust a little bit based on how many calories we have to play with. But then we can set, kind of carbohydrates from there, and we can adjust fat if we feel like we need to get more carbs in. Now, if your performance is suffering and you just feel like either you can't fully get through a workout, or your body is not recovering fast enough in between sets for you to do another, you may either just not have enough energy, and that may mean that you need more carbohydrates, or you need to eat closer to when you are, working out to fuel that performance. The biggest thing with general performance in the gym is you do not want to be hungry. So eating enough so that you do not feel hungry, because this will make you feel more depleted. Like I said, you don't necessarily need carbs. The carbs you've eaten and stored in the last 24 hours should be enough. So making sure that you've eaten enough carbs in some time frame to refuel your glycogen, give you enough, and that you are not hungry when you go to the gym. Making sure that you have enough calories for that to fuel performance, and then adjusting as necessary. If we're stuck, maybe we need to up it a little bit more. Maybe we do need a little bit of a boost. Maybe we need to eat a little closer to our workout, or maybe we need to adjust macronutrients to get more carbohydrates or something in before that workout to be able to fuel us through it. Then, are we eating enough to recover? Are we getting enough calories? Are we getting enough protein, carbohydrates? And this is where fats will also come in. Making sure that we're getting enough healthy fats for, inflammation and joint health, joint recovery, all of that kind of stuff will help as well. And just being able to absorb nutrients, hormonal health. So making sure that we're eating enough overall to recover. And then, once we have that fixed in, that's when, nutrient timing might actually matter. So maybe, eating a higher carbohydrate meal, higher carbs, higher protein after the workout sparks that recovery a little bit more. We save fats for later in the day so that they can store overnight and we have that to use, the next day or whatever it might be. But are we doing that appropriately? And then, how is our digestion? Are we eating too much to be able to digest? Are we trying to eat a bunch of processed food to eat enough calories? Our digestion's messed up. Are we trying to eat right before the workout and that's affecting our digestion? And then if you're having GI issues or you're digesting too much food, your body can't partition energy properly. And you're just not going to feel good when you're trying to work out. So maybe that is affecting performance. So looking at all of those variables nutritionally will help us determine, what we're doing from a plateau perspective. Then obviously sleep. And in here, I'm going to put the recovery aspect. So are we getting enough sleep? Is this a time in our life when, we're busy at work or busy with kids or busy traveling and we're just not getting enough sleep? And maybe that's why our, strength performance has plateaued. And if we can fix that sleep, then maybe it gets a little bit better. Are we super stressed out with work, family, travel, whatever it might be? And this just isn't a time to make a bunch of strength gains because, psychologically we're just not there and it's affecting our recovery. So that's an area to look at as well. And now that we've done all of that, now I want to look at training volume. Again, we've covered everything. So we looked at, we're looking at our rep ranges, we're looking at the intensity that we're doing, the loads that we're using. Are we trying to overload? Are we utilizing, different techniques and tempos to try and work through sticking points? We've figured out we're on point with nutrition, we're sleeping okay, we feel good. Okay, maybe it's just time for more volume. Maybe the body just needs more stimulus to adapt. So we just give it, we up the volume, we up a set each week until, maybe we finally break through. Our body adapts. We develop better skills. Psychologically, we feel better about doing the weight, whatever that might be. Then maybe that's where the volume really comes into play and we can finally adjust that. So we've done everything else. Now we got to volume. Is this the variable that is going to help us break this plateau? Lastly, I said we'd talk about supplements. When it comes to strength, the supplements I will go for, obviously creatine. If you are not taking it, you might as well. You probably would be taking it anyway if your goal is to get stronger. It seems to be the most effective thing that it does is help you fuel performance. From a pure muscle growth perspective, creatine doesn't seem to be the cause of actual muscle growth. It seems like creatine actually it fuels performance and recovery, which then leads to muscle growth by being able to train harder and do a little bit more. So I think for strength, it's definitely a really good one. Next one is going to be caffeine. If you are not utilizing caffeine prior to your workouts, go ahead and start putting that in. Maybe it's a supplement that you need to be able to perform a little bit better. It increases power, it decreases feelings of pain, it increases contractile speed. So it does a lot of good things outside of even just the feeling of it. And also, if you're a person who regularly drinks caffeine, consuming caffeine before your workout can help lessen feelings of withdrawal, because caffeine is an addictive substance. Your body does actually withdraw from it. So if you're even working out like in the afternoon, even in the evening, I don't necessarily recommend too much caffeine, but maybe, if you're trying not to because you're lifting in the evening, maybe trying to find a smaller dose that helps you get a better workout as long as it doesn't affect your sleep. Maybe that might be a key. If we have caffeine too late in the day, maybe we do need a supplement to help our sleep. And that would be the other place I would look from a, supplement perspective, is sleep. So thinking about maybe melatonin or some ashwagandha to help us, lower stress levels, go to sleep a little bit easier. Some stuff like that to help sleep and, stress levels and bring that down might help you as well. So that might be a place to look if there's just not a lot we can do about our sleep and our stress. We're doing everything that we reasonably can. Maybe adding in something like that might help as well. So now, let's think about muscle. Stalls in muscle growth for extended periods of time, either muscle groups that just won't grow, or, you're just kind of close to maxing out whatever that growth might be. How do we eke out a little bit more? But mainly it's how do we get off that? There are certain muscle groups that just don't seem to grow. And I think it's because different muscles in our body respond to different stimulus. And a lot of times I think we try to give muscle groups the same stimulus. It's like, if your triceps don't grow, like you just got to do more triceps. Or if your quads won't grow, you just got to do more quads. But that's not necessarily as easy. Sometimes the lower body responds better to heavier weight, lower reps, upper body, the opposite. Whatever it might be, different muscle groups are going to respond differently to different stimuli. So thinking about that as well. And that's why we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. Now, first thing we're going to look at here, and it's going to be more important for muscle, is volume. Is it adequate? Volume is definitely a driver for muscle growth. We know that muscle, from a training perspective, is driven by mechanical tension. So we need to have sufficient volume to provide sufficient tension over time to grow a muscle. So are we getting enough? What is the minimum? I'd say the bare minimum to actually grow muscle is probably 10 sets per week per muscle group that you want to grow. We usually say it seems to be like 12 to 20 in the studies that are shown. Like that's where a difference is actually shown from less than that. Anything over doesn't seem to be that much better. I mean, they've shown some studies where like people have grown muscle by progressing volume over time, but it's not a lot over just the adequate amount. So, and there's not a lot of studies that have shown that really, really high volume, but we'll get there. We'll come back to volume again at the end. That's going to be that last variable that we're going to look at. So then we can look at rep range and intensity. I'm going to lump these together in this case because I do think that they go together. So first of all, intensity for muscle growth. If you are not pushing the muscle group to a very close proximity to failure, stop everything that you're doing and just go do that first. We need to reach that proximity to failure to maximize that tension on the muscle. If you are not training hard, stop everything you're doing, Go do the exact same thing you're doing and train hard for a month and let me know what happens. If every set you do is a 6 or 7 out of 10, that is not hard enough to grow sufficient muscle. If you really want to get jacked, you want to build a legit amount of muscle, train harder first before you do anything. And I will die on that hill. If you are not training hard, I don't give a shit what else you're doing. Stop what you're doing, go train harder. Let me know what happens. So, pushing to that 1 to 2 RIR at least, having some sets in your, exercise program, push to failure. Like, can't move the weight any further. Doing lengthened partials at the end, like the whole deal. You literally can't move the weight. Push it to failure. See what happens. Do this with safe exercises to start. Know exactly what it feels like, but start doing that first. Okay, now we can talk about rep ranges. So they say 8 to 12 reps builds muscle. Anything over 12 is muscular endurance. Anything under 8 is strength. This is not the case. You can build strength in really any rep range. I'll go as low as like 3. If, again, that intensity is there. But pushing super high intensities at 3 reps, 5 reps, like the weights you're going to use to push that close to failure are going to be heavy. And it's going to be hard on you from a recovery perspective. It's going to be hard on you mentally to finish the workout after doing, a set of squats at that intensity with that kind of weight. So maybe we can play around with where we implement that and how we do it, making sure that we're very smart about it. But let's find a rep range that works for us in that muscle group. So are we doing too many reps and is the weight too light? So again, we're going to assume everything we're doing here is pushing the intensity to where we want it to be in that 1 to 2 RIR or 8 to 9 RPE with a few sets at least push to failure. Okay, so everything we're doing is assumed that that is the case. So maybe we're doing, a bunch of reps. We're in the 15 to 20 rep range. We can go as high as like 30. They've never studied anything over 30, so I don't think there's a lot of magic I don't think that's actually the cap, but like, come on, it's going to be boring. Like, how many sets of 30 can you do to failure? Anyway, but like, so we'll say like 15 to 20, like you're just doing a lot of reps. Maybe it's just too light. Maybe your body needs more load to be able to adapt. So maybe trying to push that rep range a little bit lower, bumping load up as that rep range comes down helps you grow a little bit. Then again, maybe we're doing too little. Maybe we're working in sets of 6 to 10 and it's not quite enough volume for that muscle group to grow. I think about something like, for me, my quads have always been a problem, mostly because it's hard for me to utilize my quads in squat patterns because of the way my body is shaped. I am very hip and glute dominant no matter what. Every time I squat, even high bar squatting, even front squatting, heels elevated, my glutes are always getting involved. Even on like the leg press, I can barely feel my quads, and it's so hard for me to get low. Regardless, it's hard for me to isolate my quads. So I had to just do more volume. I had to find exercises that hit my quads and hit them with more and more and more and more volume. I was training a lot of heavy leg work for a really long time. That's how I like to train legs. And it just wasn't enough reps. So I had to find exercises that could isolate the quads and do more volume. And then I started to see growth. I was just going too heavy, getting my glutes too involved. So I had to pull back, find ranges of motion that I could do that worked the quads and really focus on utilizing my quads. So I had to pull back the weight, do more reps, do more volume because of that. So finding the areas that work for you, or finding the rep ranges that work for each muscle group. This is going to take trial and error for everybody. Maybe, like I said, you were doing a bunch of reps at lighter weights and it was working for a while, but then your body adapted to that stimulus. So now we need to change it. Let's change it and see what happens. Then we can, start to find maybe there's a sweet spot in there, or maybe we just need to keep shifting back and forth to let the body adapt to new stimulus every now and then. Or maybe we find that we lower the rep range, get really, really strong, and then we can use more weight at those higher reps and then see more muscle growth. So it's a continued trial and error, but making sure that regardless, you are pushing the intensity and that you find the rep range that works for you. Also, finding the rep range that works for each muscle group recovery wise. Maybe if you do too heavy on your legs get really, really sore, but you can do more volume if you go a little bit lighter and do higher rep. So the recovery is actually better and you can train a little bit harder, and that leads to better growth. So marrying these two things in the intensity and the rep range for each muscle group is really, really where the secret sauce is, I think. And that also brings me to one other thing that I hadn't actually considered before, but I'm thinking about it now, is exercise selection. So what exercises can you do that feel really good in the rep range at the high intensity? So, if you're thinking about your back, there's certain exercises that I can do very, very heavy, like lat pull downs or something, and that seems to work really, really well. But single arm movements, a single arm lat pull down or straight arm lat pull downs or something, I like a little bit more volume because that isolation allows me to get a little bit higher and I can't go quite as heavy, and my body seems to respond to that better. So figuring out what exercises work in each rep range that you feel the best, that you're able to recover from at the intensities that you need to. Because if you do, too many heavy like barbell rows to close to failure, maybe your core gives out before you even get as close to failure as you should. So maybe you have to pick a different exercise there, or maybe you have to do that a little bit differently. Maybe a chest supported like T-bar row hits that better and allows you to grow more muscle. Utilizing straps and other assistance and other stabilizing techniques, I think might actually help you produce more muscle growth as well, because you can push that intensity higher with that muscle group without something else failing, without your grip failing, without your core failing you. That's why doing something like deadlifts to failure is not a great way to grow your legs. I mean, deadlifts aren't a great way to grow that much muscle anyway. You'll definitely get bigger if you get stronger, but as far as isolating muscle, that's not maybe an ideal lift. Even like squats or something, yes, they're great for your legs, but if my lower back gives out before my legs do, maybe it's not the best grower. Maybe it just helps get me stronger, and then I utilize something like a leg press or a hack squat, some sort of lunge, anything like that to actually grow my legs. So then start again to look at cardio, daily activity. Is cardio too high to be able to recover? Are we doing too much? Are we not doing enough? So if you don't do any cardio, something that cardio does do, there was a study they did where they had people bike and then do, I think it was leg extensions or leg press. Maybe it was both. Anyway, they had them bike and then do leg exercises, and then they had the other group not bike and do the same leg exercises. The people that biked did or grew more muscle in their legs because they showed that there was more blood flow, more oxygen that was able to get to the muscles to help it recover and actually, I think, perform a little bit better and it actually showed more muscle growth. So if we're not doing any cardio at all and we're not pushing blood to the area, we're not able to get oxygen to the area. When you're not able to get oxygen to a muscle, you can't get the carbon out. And if you can't get the carbon out, that is what causes that fatigue, that burning feeling. So if you're able to get more oxygen to the muscle and get that carbon out, you're actually able to go a little bit longer. Now, this is not, you don't have to be a cardio, master to be able to do this. You don't have to be an endurance athlete. You just have to have decent enough cardio to be able to get some oxygen into your body, have your heart pump at a healthy rate, and be able to get up into that heart rate and be able to maintain it, just so that you can get through some longer, harder sets. And then daily activity. What is our daily activity? Is it too much to recover from? Again, or are we not doing enough to kind of keep fat burning? I hate using that word, but just to be able to burn enough calories throughout the day to maintain a lean enough physique to see the muscle that we're building and see the muscle and have that muscular look that we're looking for. So looking at daily activity in that way is also going to be key. Then nutritionally, are we eating enough calories? Because a lot of people that want to look jacked also want to be lean. I think there's a mismatch of, trying to diet and gain muscle. It doesn't always work that way. We need to take time to gain muscle. So are we eating enough? Are we eating enough protein? Obviously, that's going to be necessary for recovery, muscle growth. And then carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are going to play, I would say, probably a bigger role in muscle growth, because carbohydrates store as glycogen. Carbohydrates also pull water. Where does glycogen store? In the muscle. What is the muscle made of? Mostly water. So if we're pulling more water and we're pulling more glycogen, our muscles will look fuller. So we want to make sure that when we go into a surplus for muscle building purposes, again, protein pretty much set in stone. We up the calories. Where do we want those calories to come from? If the goal is muscle growth, we want them to come from carbs. Maybe we're trying to build muscle on a low carb diet because we see people on the internet do it. Let me tell you from experience, I was on a low carb diet for a very long time. I tapped out very quickly at what I looked like. If you want to see, I can show you pictures. I was very lean, but I could not get as big as I wanted to. My muscle growth stalled. My strength stalled. So I had to add carbs back in to be able to get bigger. And then when I got leaner again, I had more muscle. So focusing on, there are some times to build some muscle. We'll put some carbs back in. Then we can maybe pull that back when we do want to lean out and hopefully maintain as much of that muscle as possible. So definitely look at your nutrition, your carbohydrates, and then I'll throw nutrient density in here too. Are we eating a healthful, health-promoting diet? We're not dirty bulking our way and then just gaining fat. So think about that. Sleep and recovery. Obviously, sleep, growth hormone, or the most growth hormone that we produce is produced during sleep. So we want to make sure that we are getting enough of that to get enough sleep cycles, because I think it's the REM sleep cycle when growth hormone's the highest. It's REM or deep. Sorry. I should know this, but it's one of those two. Either way, we want to get a lot of both. We want to get as much as we can of both of those. So quality to get enough sleep cycles, or quantity to get enough sleep cycles, quality to make sure that we are getting into REM and deep sleep in each of those cycles. So making sure that you're able to do that is going to aid recovery. Again, stress levels. I don't think this is stressed enough, especially when we're trying to add high intensities to things that can lead to more muscle damage, more soreness, more DOMs. So thinking about that, and what are you recovering from? Are you able to recover? Are we doing too much? Do we need to rest more? Do we need to manage stress better? All those things, making sure that recovery is good. Now, we figured out all these things, right? Our intensity is there. We know at this point what rep ranges work for our muscle groups. We've seen rep ranges work and our muscles grow. All these different things. Our nutrition's on point. We're sleeping great. We're just stuck. Okay. Now maybe that muscle group needs more volume. Maybe it's time for a specialization period, because getting volume over like 20 sets a week and up is, going to be time consuming. It's going to take up a lot of recovery capacity. Maybe we need to utilize specialization periods. I did this for my back and my quads about a year ago. I was like, I need my back to be bigger. My lats would not grow. I needed to hit them with more volume. I changed my exercise selection and it worked. But in that time frame, I wasn't able to train chest and, really any of the pushing muscles all that hard. I had to pull the volume back because I just didn't have enough time. I didn't have the recovery capacity. So when we're considering upping volume, we should do it for specific muscle groups at specific times, probably, unless we know that like a certain muscle group, we can just crush it with volume, isolation muscles and stuff like that, and it's fine. We can keep doing that. But bringing volume back in other areas, other muscle groups, to just a maintenance level, which is actually pretty low. We can look at like 6 to 9 sets, maybe even like 3 hard sets a week to maintain muscle, and then upping the volume in other areas there. And then we can consider supplementation as well. Again, creatine, we talked about why it's going to be great for muscle growth. It's going to improve performance, improve recovery. Caffeine, again, going to improve performance in the gym. I mean, those are really the two like most effective supplements. You could look at maybe like citrulline as a pre-workout to improve blood flow. You could look at something like rhodiola, has some evidence as a pre-workout supplement to, it improves like mood and focus and kind of energy levels. So, you feel better throughout the workout and you can kind of finish it a little bit harder. I know a lot of people like beta alanine. It's pretty much useless. I use it because I like the face tingle. It lets me know like it's time to lock in. And I feel something psychologically. I know it's not doing anything to my body, but it makes me feel like I can go harder. Other than that, I mean, just making sure that you're fueled properly, and recovering. Again, maybe some of the sleep supplements to help with that growth hormone production and recovery. Maybe some stress stuff. Like I said, I like ashwagandha for that. Some fish oils maybe from a recovery perspective. Something like that. So I'd say that's probably the big one. So with that, we'll get to fat loss. What are the components of fat loss that we need to consider? This time, we're actually going to start with nutrition. I'm not going to start with the training plan on this one because fat loss and weight loss always start with nutrition. Are you adhering to your calories over the week? I cannot stress this enough. Calories do not live by the arbitrary 24-hour clock that we have decided is what it is. Actually, they probably don't even live by this weekly clock, but it makes the most sense to break it down into a week. So many people are awesome during the week. Monday through Thursday, most of Friday, some of Sunday. But then, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday before dinner, like it's just a shit show. And calories are so high, and when you average it out over the week, we're destroying our calorie deficit on the weekend. I've been guilty of this so many times in my life. And when you actually realize this piece of it, it kind of changes everything. We need to adjust our calories to maintain a weekly calorie budget. If we overspend on the weekends and we do not adjust, we will go broke. Nutrition broke. We're not going to get where we want if we continue to sabotage ourselves and go over that calorie budget. So, making sure that you are actually hitting your calories for the week. And if you're not tracking on the weekends, please start. Figure out how many calories you're actually eating on the weekends. It will be eye-opening and astounding. People don't think they're eating too much, but when you eat out, you are eating so many more calories than you think. I cannot stress this enough. If your goals are fat loss and you are not tracking for 3 days out of the week, let's say Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's 12 days out of the month. That's more than a third. It's more than a third of your month. You're not tracking anything. How can you expect to make progress like that? How can we expect to manage anything like that when we don't even know what's happening? You're like, oh, I'm not eating that much. But really, you're eating 2,000 calories over your maintenance, or, whatever it might be. I mean, you really have to track and try to focus on controlling as many variables as you can. You can't eat out that many meals and try to control enough variables. I just don't think it can work. So managing your calories over the week and making sure that you know. Also, it is very hard to determine what the best deficit is if it's not being tracked over a long enough period of time. To really determine like your maintenance calories, we need at least 2 to 3 weeks of the same amount of food and your weight not really changing to even determine if that's your maintenance, because all the calorie calculators are just estimates. So making sure that we hone in on what is your actual maintenance, what are your actual calories, how many calories should you be eating, are you actually in a deficit, what should that deficit be? Maybe we are in a deficit, maybe it's like a 300 calorie deficit. Eventually we lose some weight, that might stop working because of metabolic adaptation and different things like that. So maybe we need to adjust the calories down. But again, if we're not tracking, then we don't know. So make sure that those calories are being tracked over the week. Are you eating enough protein? This is another big one nutritionally, especially for maintaining and building muscle. If you're, in a deficit and you have enough fat mass that you can kind of recomp and build muscle and lose fat at the same time, protein's going to be super important there. Protein will benefit your metabolism. It is a very small benefit, but when we are trying to lose fat, why not take every benefit you can get? And the benefits of protein just keep adding up. So it's going to help muscle, it's going to help recovery, it's going to help your health. If there's a small benefit to your metabolism, even better. Is your macro breakdown, working for you? Some people respond differently to higher fat, higher carb. Some people respond adherence-wise. They do better with more carbohydrates in their diet. They're able to adhere to the diet. Maybe they like to eat a little bit lower carb. So finding that macro breakdown, again, calories are what they are for the most part. Like we got to find the deficit level. We have to find the maintenance. We have to find the deficit. Then we can do carbs and fats. We need like probably a minimum level of 20% of your calories from fat, trying to keep it around there. And then we can fill carbs in, but then we can adjust. Maybe, hormonally you do better with a little bit more fat, or, recovery wise, whatever it might be. So making sure that macro breakdown works for your body, that you feel good, and that, you're able to adhere to whatever that macro breakdown is. It works with your preferences, because let me tell you, any diet will work if you stick to it. If you can't stick to it, it is not going to work. Are you getting enough nutrients? Are you eating a balanced whole food diet that has enough fiber to support digestion and make you feel good heart health wise? Everything like that is going to play a role as well. So food quality is also going to be important here. Um, and then, obviously, what of these things do you need to adjust? Are you not accounting for food quality and you're just eating a bunch of diet foods like protein bars and I don't even know what else, protein chips and different stuff like that. Like these processed protein products are awesome. It's great that we can get more protein in, we can cut calories, but we need to balance that out with other nutrient dense foods because we're taking the nutrition and the satiety is just not there from those foods. It's great to get the protein, it's great to keep the calories down, but we need to make sure that we're getting enough nutrients. So does food quality need to be adjusted? Anything like that. When it comes to training for fat loss, we don't train for fat loss. Period. End of story. Training is not for fat loss. Training is for performance and other bodily adaptations like building muscle. We train to get things. We train to get more endurance. We train to get stronger. We train to get muscle. We train to feel better. We train to move better. But there is a scenario where cardio will help burn calories. Movement will help you burn calories. So I put training after nutrition because until the nutrition's on point, I don't really care about training for fat loss. But if our nutrition's on point and we've gotten calories down pretty low and we've stalled out, this is where I think cardio can start to help. Now it's like, okay, we have the energy in, energy out equation. We brought energy in to a point where we really can't go any lower because we're just not going to be able to stick to it or we're just going to feel like shit. So we got that down there. Now it's like, okay, we need to bring the energy out up. This is where we can add in cardio. So don't add cardio and diet at the same time because then we run out of levers to pull. If we start with diet, we pull those calories down to a point where we're like, okay, I don't really want to go much lower, but I'd like to get a little bit leaner. Now I can move activity up. So I like to think about this is when we're increasing that activity, what can we recover from? Because sometimes doing some high intensity cardio or doing too much with calories too low, we're not going to be able to recover or we will feel too hungry. I know for me personally, if I go hard on the cardio, I get really, really hungry. So it's harder for me to sustain a diet. So I need to make sure that my cardio is super not intense, super low intensity. So just walking, daily steps, everything like that. So that's where my sweet spot is, and that's what I do, is I just up my steps. I try not to increase the intensity of the cardio. I keep my high intensity cardio to a minimum just to get the actual cardio adaptation. But finding the sweet spot of what intensity of that cardio you increase is going to help you. And this is where I think zone 2, just more walking, more daily activity is actually the best answer here to increase calorie burn and not affect you kind of hunger and recovery wise. So make sure that you're doing that. Are you making sure that you're building and maintaining muscle? Now, muscle has a metabolic benefit. Again, it's pretty small, but we should take everything we can get. So trying to at least train to maintain as much muscle as possible while keeping that protein intake high is going to be really key. Again, if you are at a substantial body fat level or you just have substantial weight to lose, you can actually build some muscle while you're losing body fat. You might as well take advantage of it. Because you have extra calories for your body to feed off of, you can just bring your protein up, train hard, and try to bring other calories down, and that'll help you lose fat and build muscle at the same time. So if you're stuck, are we losing too much muscle and it's affecting one, our metabolism, but two, also our performance, because we don't feel as good. We're not as strong. We're not able to go as hard in the gym. We're not recovering as well. So, looking at it there, and then stop training just to burn calories. I think a lot of people do this. They'll continue upping activity and upping activity. And even as calories come down lower and lower, they either A, can't stick to it because they're fucking starving, or B, they end up injuring themselves because they're under recovering from eating such low calories. And then they continue to try to push through injury because they think they just have to keep losing weight. This is reaching like disordered eating disorder levels. So we don't want to work out to just burn calories. We're working out to make adaptation. We're utilizing some activity to keep our calorie burn a little bit higher, but we're not just working out to burn calories. Doing this is an endless cycle that will eventually lead to some form of burnout, whether it's injury, hating exercise, hating dieting, starving yourself, anything like that. So let's not work out to just burn calories. Let's work out to make training adaptations. Again, sleep. Sleep is going to be very important for fat loss, for metabolism, glucose control, decision making, mood. Dieting's not super fun. I mean, restricting your eating in this environment socially is not always fun. It's not fun to be hungry. There's a reason our bodies get hungry. But if we're not sleeping, then those decisions are even harder to make. Again, when glucose gets out of control, it can mess up hunger hormones. Like I said, when you don't sleep, it can mess up hunger hormones, make your decision making worse, make it harder to choose the right food or have the energy levels to go work out. And when we don't work out, we're out of our routine, out of our healthy habits. We eat less healthy, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be affected. Recovery, we need to make sure that we're managing things like stress levels, again, because I think they just have such a psychological effect on all the other things that I mentioned with sleep. And I think it will actually mess you up hormonally if you're chronically stressed out. And if it's a time when you're super stressed at work or super stressed with your family or whatever's going on, maybe it's not the time to also be in a calorie deficit and be stressing your body out that way. A calorie deficit is stressful for your body. If there's a bunch of other stressors going on in your life, your recovery is just going to be a mess. So managing that, and maybe in times of very, very serious stress, it's not time to focus on fat loss. Maybe we come back to maintenance, get rid of the food focus a little bit, leave that stress, figure out the other stress, and we can come back to fat loss. But if we don't take control of that, I think it can lead to us actually overeating and, stressfully maybe binge eating or going off the rails because we're just so restricted that all of a sudden, like, we get to an event and we're just shoveling food because it feels good and that's our time to unwind. So making sure that you manage it so that you don't go overboard in times of stress either, I think can be really, really crucial for fat loss. As far as supplementation for fat loss, I'm just gonna leave it as a no. Like, it just doesn't seem to be effective at all. I mean, if everything else is on point and we're talking about getting like bodybuilding level lean or losing that last like couple percentage points, like maybe like some carnitine or something like that could help. Maybe there's some things that could help appetite wise. I don't even really want to go there because it just doesn't seem to be effective enough. And there's all of these other things that have to be on point, I think, before any of it can even matter, that I don't really care. So considering all of that, hopefully you can now determine if you are actually plateaued and the steps that you need to take for each of those plateaus. So just to recap, we're talking about strength. What's our training program look like? Are we working in rep ranges that are working for us? Do we need to find different tempos or exercise techniques to overload or work through sticking points? Where's our intensity? Are we working at a high enough intensity to adapt? Are we working at too high of an intensity that we can't adapt? What's our nutrition look like? Do we need to add maybe some carbs? Do we need to fix the timing of our nutrients? Do we just need more nutrient density? So looking at that from a strength perspective, do we need to sleep more? Do we need to manage stress better? Is stress out of control? So really we just need to focus on maintenance of strength for a while, because we're just not going to be able to make the adaptations. And then, are we taking creatine? Are we getting some caffeine? Those kind of things. Muscle, same deal. No matter what, intensity better be there. If it's not, fuck off, go home, go back, listen to the whole podcast again, get your intensity up. But as far as that goes, then we can start to look at what rep ranges are we working in? Are they working for those muscle groups? Are we able to recover? What's our exercise selection look like? Are we able to push the intensity on the exercises that we're selecting? Do we need to make adjustments to push that intensity higher on those exercises? Nutritionally, are we eating enough protein? Are we eating enough carbs? Are we eating enough calories? But we don't need to eat too many. I didn't mention this for muscle growth, but as far as the surplus goes, it needs to be maybe 5-10% above maintenance. We don't need to go much higher than that, because we want to minimize fat gain, and we want to avoid dirty bulking. When we're trying to eat a bunch of nutrient-dense foods to support our body and support performance, it's going to be harder to overeat those foods. So we don't need to go into such a surplus that we need to start adding a ton of processed foods. Maybe there's a little bit more room for it. Maybe we have some freedom, and that's great. But we don't want to go overboard still. So making sure that that is on point, and then you're fueled properly for your workout and you can get through it, because they might be a little bit longer, a little bit higher volume. Sleep, making sure we're getting enough sleep. Growth hormone is highest when we're sleeping, so getting enough of that and making sure that we're getting through our sleep cycles and getting enough time in REM and deep sleep to recover. Definitely going to be crucial. Managing stress will help you manage recovery, avoid injuries and feelings of pain, all those kind of things. Make sure the stress is on point. If you're super stressed out, maybe it's not time to be building muscle. And then supplementation, basically the same thing. Maybe there's a few other things that could help you in the gym, but we're looking at creatine, caffeine, the ones that work. Fat loss, making sure that our nutrition is on point and actually on point, and we are actually being consistent over the week. Calorie budget. Look at a weekly calorie budget, please. Calculate your maintenance. Calculate that for an entire week. Calculate a deficit for the entire week. Give yourself an amount of calories per day that allow you to hit that number per week, please. Stop going off track on the weekends. Stop not tracking on the weekends and assuming you're doing fine. It's hard. We're terrible estimators. It's so hard to estimate when you go out. So being able to control as many variables as you can until you reach the point where you understand your body and understand food well enough that you can go out and make some good choices. Please spend some time tracking and being more consistent throughout the entire week. Make sure we eat enough protein. If we're not, maybe that number needs to come up. Making sure our macro breakdown is good, that we're able to adhere to the diet. If we miss carbs so much that we end up overeating, maybe we need to give ourselves more carbs and cut the fat back. Or, if hormonally we're struggling, or we're struggling with energy levels or something, maybe fat needs to come up a little bit. Or we're just not able to adhere to a very low fat diet. Again, making sure that that is on point. Nutrient density, want to make sure we're getting enough whole foods, getting enough fiber so that our body feels fueled, we feel full, we feel like we're doing our body good. That is also going to be important. Don't just focus on diet foods. They're great to have. They're great as a substitute, but make sure you balance that out with nutrients. Training program, We are not going to train for fat loss. We can utilize more daily activity and more low intensity cardio once we reach a calorie point where we don't want to go much lower or we just can't. So that's where cardio and more activity can come in. Make sure that you are recovering. Make sure that it is not just to burn fat. You understand that you're doing it because you can get a little bit more movement, that you have a healthy mindset around it. Make sure that you're still also training to maintain as much muscle and strength as you can so that you continue to feel good and support your metabolism as much as possible. And then again, making sure you're sleeping for the metabolic and psychological benefits, managing stress for those same hormonal, metabolic, and psychological benefits. Supplementation, don't fucking worry about it. Maybe caffeine helps you with energy levels and maybe it helps your appetite a touch, but really don't waste your money on over-the-counter fat loss supplements. So I hope this really helps you determine if you're actually plateaued or if you're just not completely on point. Don't just assume that the program isn't working, the training program that you're doing isn't working, or the diet you're doing isn't working if you're not considering all of the other factors. Maybe you're not actually plateaued and maybe this all isn't pointless. Maybe you can still make adaptations. We just need to make some adjustments. So think about that as you go through a list of what is my goal? What am I doing now? Am I doing everything possible? Maybe I'm not plateaued, or maybe there's just small adjustments that need made. I don't need to overhaul everything. And that should, I think, really help you determine if you're plateaued and what to do about it and help you reach your goal. That has been this episode of the Lifting Cues podcast. I really hope this helps. I hope this gives you some great cues on how to adjust your plateaus and really get through them. If you like this episode, please like, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Follow me at CoachQ_fitness on Instagram. Follow me at Coach Q on Facebook. Let me know if you like the episode. Send me a DM, comment on my posts, leave a review. Ask your questions. I can answer them on the podcast. It is called Lifting Cues. I do want to answer your questions, so let me know your questions. Look out for my posts asking for questions so that you can get them answered right here on the podcast. Until next week, lifters, I'll see you then.